Well, my research that I spoke about here at this conference was all about the return of apex predators in Southern California. Specifically a couple species of sharks, white sharks, leopard sharks, and soupfin sharks, and some other big charismatic reef fishes like white sea bass and black sea bass, or giant sea bass.
We hear all the time about the decline of these predators. What led to their recovery in this Southern California system?
Well, these species that I just mentioned, and a whole host of other ones, have all been caught in fisheries in Southern California at some point over the last 100 years or more. Some of them were targeted, but some of them were incidental in these fisheries. And so all of them had showed, for one reason or another, pretty big declines. And what the research of my collaborators, Chris Lowe, Dan Pondella, and Larry Allen, they found that you could tie the recoveries of these species back to the removal of gill nets from the nearshore areas of Southern California. That explained more about the return of these predators than environmental variables.
What exactly is a gill net?
So gill net, I refer to it loosely, but all entangling nets, gill nets, and trammel nets, they're set in areas that basically capture fishes by entangling them in one way or another, either by the gills or entangling the whole fish. They're very, very non-selective gear types. They tend to have a lot of bycatch.
And were these shark species that you mentioned, were they targeted or were they bycatch?
Well, soupfin and leopard sharks were actually the subjects of targeted fisheries, so they were fished. But white sharks looked like there's never been a targeted fishery for white sharks in Southern California, despite some attempts at making that happen. So they were bycatch in this fishery.
And over what time frame has this recovery happened?
Well, so what happened is sort of interesting. In Southern California, there was legislation. Actually, a proposition on the ballot resulted in the banning of gill nets from the nearshore areas, and that happened in 1994. Actually, it was voted into place in 1990. It took effect in 1994. So very shortly thereafter, Larry Allen from Cal State Northridge and Dan Pondella from Occidental University, they started an experimental scientific gill netting program to see if they could document the effects of this nearshore gill net ban. And so since this period of 1994, they've seen increases in the two targeted shark species, leopard sharks and soupfin sharks, but also glimmers of a return of the giant sea bass in nearshore waters, which was also caught as bycatch.
So how giant are these sea bass?
The giant sea bass are pretty giant. They get up to 7 feet or so in length, and 4 to 5, 6, 700 pounds, or they used to. But we haven't seen them that size, and we really haven't even seen them around very much in the last 30 years or so, until recently.
So you said this was voted on a proposition. How did you get public support behind a measure to restrict fishing?
Okay, so this is a cool story, but it wasn't me that did this. But what happened was, throughout the 1970s, that's when gill nets were being used quite heavily. Sport fishermen started to realize that their favorite fisheries looked like they were declining, and that was mainly white sea bass and halibut. And in addition, many environmental groups and citizens were realizing that these gill nets had a pretty dramatic effect on seabirds and on marine mammals. They'll entangle anything that gets into them. They worked for 25, even 30 years with the legislature of the state and also the California Department of Fish and Game, and really didn't affect any major changes. So they took it to the people in the form of a ballot initiative, Proposition 132. There was a campaign complete with dramatic posters and flyers. They raised the support. They had to get 600,000 signatures to get it on the ballot. They got it on the ballot, and in 1990, the people of California passed this ban. Excellent.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about the recovery of predators or your own research? Or
Well, when I talk about recovery is a continuum. So I don't mean to say that apex predators have recovered in Southern California. What the work of my colleagues and myself showed was that we're on the way to recovery. We're on the road to recovery. The black sea bass is a great example. The giant sea bass, some people call it black sea bass. It is still listed on the IUCN red list. So this species is not in great shape, and even those shark species I talked about, they're not at the levels that they were pre-fishing. But what this work has shown is that they seem to be on the road to recovery. There's definite improvement.